Hey, my name is Andrew Kapland, and you're in the middle of listening to a 7-part mini-series going behind the scenes with the Navattic growth team. We explored all kinds of things that typically don't get shared publicly in the growth community. We talked about how they think about growth, how they set their strategy, their operating system, what they track, what they don't track, how often they share internally to drive alignment, and we talked about some of their biggest challenges, their fears, and their speed bumps along the way. Let's jump back in where we left off. We talked a little bit about your funnel, but we've talked about data in a lot of different ways today. So I know that you track a whole bunch of stuff outside of that. Maybe we could start this conversation by starting with what KPIs the two of you are looking at on a regular basis. If you have dashboards, like if you could pull up a mental image of the dashboard, what is in the dashboard that you're tracking today and where is that data?
We have a monthly website funnel, so we'll update that periodically, and it just tracks our entire funnel from someone landing on the site to interacting with our interactive demos to going to our demo page down through the funnel. And then we also have some HubSpot and Salesforce funnels that I'm sure Natalie can talk more about.
Yeah. So the monthly funnel, that's really helpful for us to determine when we do want to use data of what problem should we focus on, helps us see where the biggest drop off is. And then very high level, I look at MQLs and pipeline. And where did the leads come from? So I have 2 different dashboards in HubSpot. I present it every single week at our team meeting. And one is, how many leads, how many MQLs, how many opportunities did it bring us? We also look at some fun things like some of the larger MQLs. What companies did they come from? I think back to Raman's point earlier of showing different teams different metrics. I find out sales really cares more about logos in the company than necessarily just numbers. So that's a fun one I can shout out oh, hey, this company came from here. And then also a lead generation dashboard that shows what was the highest sources, where did the leads come from, both categorized and sometimes uncategorized. So you can see hey, how many leads came from seeing other customer tours, and we'll actually get to see what customers those were. So try to do a fun mix of typical dashboards and then a little more qualitative that maybe the team can grasp onto a little more.
And so you mentioned looking at those numbers on a weekly basis. Are there other metrics that you have that are available? Let's say you're looking at that dashboard and you see something that you don't like or something that's concerning. Do you have other things that you can look at that go into more granularity? And if so, what types of stuff are in those types of reports?
I'd say it's more that report broken up by channel.
Okay.
So that's where the lead generation helps, where the MQLs shows me every week how many leads are we getting and roughly where are they coming from. But then I can also look at, okay, are ads down? LinkedIn's always hard to directly attribute, but is LinkedIn down? Is SEO down? And kind of get an idea of where is that drop off. But because we do a lot of word of mouth stuff, sometimes it's hard to tell. Usually I don't find a perfect answer.
And are y'all presenting stuff on an ongoing basis? You talked about on a weekly basis, sharing some things with the sales team. Are there other metrics that one or both of you share at a company level? And if so, what are those and how often do you share them?
Very high level leadership. I mean, every quarter it's pipeline. That I don't just share mostly with the CEO, but if we don't hit it, we'll have to talk with this bigger leadership team. And then for each individual experiment, Raman, I think it'd be cool to talk about the Slack system and channel we have set up and how we show if an experiment was a winner or learner.
Yeah, so we have for each experiment, we'll create an experimentation framework and people can subscribe to the experiment. And in that, we outline what our KPIs are for each individual experiment. And all of that's publicly shared. So once an experiment's a success or a learner, we'll put it into a growth experimentation Slack channel where people are from the company are in that channel. And we'll outline hey, this is the metrics we hit. This is the metrics we didn't hit. And we'll really publicly celebrate if it's a success and if it's a learner and talk about what we learned from it and how we're planning to iterate on it.
And are there KPIs that you feel like your peers or other companies are talking about that the two of you aren't tracking?
I think one thing I question a lot, well, actually 2 things. One is, as I mentioned earlier, we don't really have a super advanced MQL score. So really, and because we don't really have a lot of gated content, it's website visitors, people interact with our demo, book meeting. Sometimes it's hard. There's a lot of steps in between that. So sometimes I feel we should just be getting more granular. And then I talked about, we're trying to think about more self-serve PLG options. And right now, all of our funnels and metrics are based on a sales-led product. So we just don't even have anything right now set up for measuring leads that do come from a more self-serve way.
We also don't have we have disparate data sources and we've talked about in the future, building out like a data architecture or like a data warehouse where we can connect like, hey, this lead came in from this campaign and like went through the funnel this way. And then this is what their feature usage and product analytics look like. And I think that's definitely something the product team's thinking about, and something like once we do have more of a data warehouse that I'm sure will be like really interesting to us too, as well, to just like get a sense of someone's full journey.
And did the two of you have a North Star metric, something that's an input? Obviously, you care a lot about pipeline. That's sort of the ultimate thing. But is there a checkpoint along the way that the two of you are hyper-focused on?
I think that's where the MQLs and conversion rates come in. So trying to hit specific website conversion rates. Well, I don't like to say like MQLs are main metric. It is a leading indicator. So obviously if MQLs are down, that gives us a good idea week over week. We can check of like what's going on there.
Right. Makes sense. And what stresses you out the most about tracking in KPIs?
I think for me, it's the idea that there's so many inputs, and sometimes it really feels like I said before, hypothesis of why MQLs are down or up. And it's so tempting to be like, we ran this experiment and, you know, on Mutiny and A/B testing, it said we got 50% higher conversion rate. That's awesome. That must have been the reason why we got more MQLs. But could have also been that, you know, conference we went to. Could have also been people are buying software more for some reason right now. So I think that's really hard, just actually being able to attribute it.
Yeah, I agree. I think just like feeling like we've actually built an experiment that's isolated, that's definitely like a concern with our metrics. But also, I think we talked about this a little bit before, like we don't have as big of an end. So like feeling comfortable being like, hey, we've ran this experiment for 3 weeks. Can we actually say yes or no? Like it's hit the metric or it hasn't. And that's like what we talked about before, of like where we blend the qualitative and quantitative a little bit.
Yeah. One of the things that happened to me when I was in house is I would get Slacks from other members of leadership, usually my COO, who would be like, hey, Andrew, I was looking at the weekly numbers on my own, and I noticed that this metric that you care a lot about is down. Why? And I'd be like, fuck, that's not good. And I'd spend hours looking into it. And it would turn out that like was some random holiday and there was less weekdays by 2 in the previous month or in the previous week or whatever. And that would screw up our data. And it would be this whole distraction for me. Does that happen with you all? And if so, how do you mitigate it?
I think our team is actually pretty good about 1 week if it's down, not being like, Natalie, why is it down 1 week? And I usually try to have some hypothesis that at that team meeting, when I'm sharing the MQL, I'll say a hypothesis. And then I try to say some ways that we're going to try to address it. It's kind of annoying when you get the one-off things. But one thing I try to look at it as is, okay, if it's 1 or 2 weeks, yeah, was there a weird holiday? You know, for some reason, Google ads down, was there something? But I think in other ways, it can kind of be helpful when it's like approaching like a month or a few weeks of things being down. I think that's almost a good signal of like, okay, we need to really evaluate again, like our go-to-market, what we're focused on. Like, are we focusing on the wrong thing right now? Are we running the wrong experiments? I even actually said to my CEO once recently, I was like, don't be afraid to call out when you're concerned about things. Yes, sometimes it can be a distraction and a little annoying, but we're aware of this stuff too. I don't want MQL to be down for too long. And sometimes I actually think it is a good indicator of, okay, is there something we have to fundamentally shift? Is there a shift in the market? And does sometimes force you to reprioritize that? Because it's so easy to just keep doing the experiments you're doing versus taking a step back.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into more about how you manage expectations and manage others. Let's do that in the next episode. Hey, thanks so much for listening. That's going to be it for this mini episode. As a reminder, you are in the middle of listening to a 7-part mini-series going behind the scenes with the Navattic growth team. And I would love your feedback. I'd love to hear what you think so far. If the content is interesting, if you're learning, if it's resonating, let me know. You can either tag me on LinkedIn at Andrew Kaplan, or you can tag the show at Delivering Value Podcast, or leave me a comment. The two best places would be one, either on my Substack, which is at media.deliveringvalue.co, where all of the episodes will be published, or on any of the individual episode pages on YouTube. And if you are enjoying the show, the best thank you would be a review. You know the game. Those reviews help the algorithm surface my show to other folks just like you. Thank you again for listening. On to the next episode.